Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name is Stuart. It's time for some more Konflikt 47 on the channel. Now, it's been a couple of months now, but Warlord Games have just sent me some new goodies to have a look at.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems and offer custom items to suit your club, your event or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description.
So Warlord have very kindly sent me a frame of the new TotenKorps Zombie Horde miniatures, and they are really fun. You see with the studio paint jobs here that a mix of different forces that have been their origins, their resources for reanimating these troops to no doubt be a bit of a dry, wet, stinky meat shield in the game of Konflikt 47. So what I'm going to do in this video today is a very quick zombie paint job. I'm going to try and do it in 10 minutes, essentially show you how you can do a super simple paint job. But before we get to that, they also sent me a PDF early review copy of Festung Europa, and it is beautiful. Now, I'm not currently playing lots of Konflikt 47. I messed around with it at the beginning when I got some bits for the initial launch, and I've just been so busy with the games. It's very much on my to-do list to come back and really get into the game in a big way, because it looks fantastic. I can use a lot of my existing bolt action stuff. But I really wanted to draw attention to how beautiful this book is, how awesome the artwork is, and all the people behind it. Some really big names from Games Workshop, older days and newer people as well. That the work they've done on this game is absolutely fantastic. You can see why it's growing really well. If you've been thinking about it and unsure, hopefully just a little flick and a little view at some of these pages that I'm sharing here will give you a little impetus to go and look it up and look into it in a little bit more detail, because it is absolutely stunning visually. There's some really fun background lore to the game, and I'm really looking forward to having some time to spend and really get into it. And that's why I'm not reviewing the rules in the books. It makes more sense just to show you the visuals and say go and check it out. It looks absolutely fantastic. There's loads of games over on the Barefoot Miniatures channel, and no doubt that Max will cover some of the rules and things over there, so I'm going to send you over there for the rules review of that book. So I'm sure he's got it as well. Let's get down to some painting. The miniatures are all laid out really nicely on the frame, and you could do an awful lot of mixing and matching if you wanted to, but the arms that you require for your sculpts are placed fairly close to the body as well. The bodies are all one piece. You just need to, and including the legs really, you just need to add the arms for those that have full arms. There's a huge range of different heads, some with helmets of different troop types obviously, some without, and different sort of stages of rotting and gruesomeness. So much character, so much fun. I was really tempted just to do a video on painting all the different faces, but I haven't really got time for that right now. But hopefully you can see that they're pretty good fun. As zombie miniatures go, these are right up there with some of the top ones I've seen over the years, and you can see with the sort of the modern sculpting techniques and things these days that these are fun, and it should be loads and loads of fun for lots of people to get some paint on. So properly to the painting now. I've started with a black prime, and I'm adding white as a zenithal through my airbrush. If you don't have an airbrush, don't worry. A black prime and a heavy dry brush in white works. A grey with a dry brush with white would be probably slightly better. And you can even use a flesh tone prime with a white dry brush as well. That will probably work very well for the speed paint techniques I'm going to be using in this. The reason for the dry brush is it really picks out a lot of that detail, because I'm going to be using contrast and Army Painter speed paint as most of the painting on this miniature. In fact, all the painting on this miniature. You can get away with lots when you're painting zombies. This is AK Quick Gen US Olive Speed Paint. I've done a review of these before. Try to remember to pop a link in. And this is probably 80% of the colour that's going to go on the bulk of the miniature here. And I'm trying to make sure that it's fairly even. So I've added it to the wet palette. And sometimes you just put just a small drop of water or thinner in there as well, medium in this case, just to make sure it flows nicely. Some of the speed paints flow better than the others. Because I'm going for one colour here, one coat, I want to make sure that it runs into those recesses, but also shows those higher areas off nicely. The whole idea of a one coat paint when you're using it like this is that you don't have to to go back and do too much painting afterwards if you don't want to. Sometimes they're quite thick in pigment and then you don't quite get that effect. And partly we can get around that by doing the zenithal that I did beforehand, so all that dry brushing and leaving some dark in the shadows really helps. But if you're not able to have the black and the zenithal that I've done with the airbrush, sometimes you want to give that a little bit of a boost, and the best way to do it is making sure that the consistency of your speed paint, fast paint, quick gen, whatever you want to call it, depending on whatever brand, gives you a nice even coat that goes into those recesses but doesn't pull or look too streaky on the flat areas. So you get that really nice balance, which saves you time in the long run. Because I'm trying to do this in one go, I'm trying not to get that paint anywhere that I don't want it as well. So I'm making sure that the belt strap there, the webbing, is left white as much as I possibly can, and not getting it on any of the areas of dead flesh or bone or hair as well. And that really helps. Otherwise you don't quite get the same effect the next time you apply a quick paint like that. So you do need to be relatively neat, but if you've got enough control over your brush, you'll find that it's easier to control these thinner paints than it might first appear. Now for that belt with a tiny bit of webbing that's left on the miniature, I'm using Skeleton Horde here. I know the paint quite well. I know that it's going to give me a nice kind of light tan effect on the miniature, showing lots of the white through so that it looks like a highlight. And again, I really want to just paint one coat here and pretty much be done with it. And I know this paint is going to work for me. And this takes, as you can see, absolutely no time at all, because there's very little of this on this miniature. This is very much an optional stage. I'm using a bone colour here, Ancient Stone, I believe, from Army Painter in this instance, and giving an extremely light dry brush over the whole miniature, making sure that I'm not leaving any heavy streaking anywhere. I'm just trying to catch some of the detail again, a bit like we did with that first white dry brush, so that you can do a bit of a sort of fake edge highlight or highlight on the miniature, and we'll glaze it back a little bit afterwards as part of the next stage. All the paints that I use in this video I will post up in a free post on my Patreon, so if you remember you'll be able to look at that for free. If not, you can just pause this video throughout and make a note of them. Now back to that Skeleton Horde again, and I'm giving a very light glaze over all the miniature where I've just done that highlight, I've just done that dry brush. And it's amazing how subtle it is, but it will just give you the appearance on all the detail of the miniature, so the upward folds of the clothing and the webbing on the belt, that it has been slightly highlighted after doing that first stage of speed paint, contrast paint, quick gen, whatever you want to call it. If you don't do this stage, it doesn't matter, especially when the paints are quite nicely thinned. However, if your paints are a little bit thicker, this can really give you a bit of a highlight where otherwise it might look a little bit muddy. Now it's time to work on some rotting flesh, and I'm using a flesh colour and a green. I want to add a little bit of green in there. So I start by adding a drop of green and a little bit of flesh paint, and then a little bit of a speed paint medium as well, just to make it a little bit thinner and get it flowing quite nicely. I want it to look pale. I don't want this person, this thing, to look alive at all. First mix looks a little bit too green for me, so I'm just adding a little bit more of that flesh in just to get it to the colour that I like. And then it's a case of just slapping it on everywhere where there's a little bit of flesh showing. So essentially all you're left with afterwards is the area that's hair and a little bit of bone that's sticking out of what's left of his left arm there. The principles are all exactly the same here as they were with the main body of the clothing, making sure that enough highlighting is showing through. So if it's too heavy, too thick, add a little bit more medium. You want to get that balance between the highlight showing through, but also paint in those recesses so you don't have to go back and do any extra work. And obviously we're going to be covering this miniature in loads of blood and grime and dirt as well, which helps cover a multitude of sins. However, just getting the mix level right of these speed paints in the first place and the placement of them can really help as well. I want to make the hair black, so Grim Black seems like a suitably named paint for this miniature. Again, tiny little part on the miniature that we need to add paint in here. Out of all the blacks that I use of quick speed paint, the Grim Black I think is the favourite one I've used so far. There's different shades, and some have bluer tones, some have browner tones. They all have good uses, but as something that can use as a one coat that goes lovely into the recesses, but also reveals those higher areas as a lighter shade of grey rather than a dark black. This for me does the best overall job of that. So if you're looking at picking up a quick paint style black, this will be the one I'd probably recommend for more uses than others. With all those basic paints down, it's time to start adding on extra layers and effects, and adding a really nice looking base will really bring your miniatures together if you're doing a very quick paint job. So nice tidy bases with lots of stuff going on can actually, again, draw the eye away from what is a very, very basic and slightly messy miniature. So adding some AK basing texture first here. And then after that, I'm adding an oil wash rather than a standard wash. But again, if you don't use oils, that's absolutely fine. Use your Agrax shade or whatever your favourite shading brown is for this kind of job. I just like using oil paints because when they dry, they look extra cool and grim and dirty as well, which I think is perfect for this kind of miniature. Now for me, this is going to be the first stage of the gore. This is murder scene. It's very rich in pigment. There's beautiful colour, but quite thick. So I'm going to thin it a fair amount with a bit of speed paint medium. And then I'm going to be very careful how I apply it, just in glazes in certain areas on the miniature. I'm going to use blood effect as well. But if you don't like using blood effect, you could leave it just with this. It looks like a duller, dried on blood, so older blood. So if you want your troops to look like they've been dead for quite a while, this might be quite a nice effect just to leave as it is. So I'm painting it in to start with where the wounds are, where the open areas are, where the rotting areas are, and then doing little streaks down onto the clothing as well. And again, extremely basic stuff here. It's not going to win any painting competitions at all, but it starts to look cool, and you know that when you've got some flock on the base that you could play with this miniature as it is now. Then for the next stage, I am using a blood effect, but also a sort of slimy, nurgly effect, depending on whether you're aware of Games Workshop paints. These are army painter paints, but they're their versions of Blood for the Blood God and the Nurgle Rot effect. So Ooze, I think this one's called. Really fun to use. They're slightly translucent when they dry. The green is obviously blending a little bit to the green clothing, so I don't use it an awful lot on this miniature, but it does add a little bit of a green, sickly tone to certain areas of the skin and keep it looking wet and sickly, which was something that I wanted to go for. Very much wet dead here rather than dry dead. Then the blood effect speaks for itself here, and I'm using quite a bit, but also trying not to apply it too thick in one area. You don't want to cover the whole miniature in blood. This isn't a scene from Carrie. This is something that you want to look grim and dirty, but you can thin this stuff. It thins quite nicely with water. You can paint with it and feather it out and blend it out. I'm just kind of enhancing really where that murder scene was and making it look a little bit fresher and a little bit wetter and a little bit grosser. And this is now where those final touches really finish any miniature off, but especially I find if you've painted a miniature in an extremely basic way, making your army nice together with matching basing and all those things can really, really give you a really cool looking army, even if you're not the most skillful painter in the world, or you paint your miniatures in a quick way because you just want to get down to gaming. So some good quality tufts. I like to brush little patches of dry pigment into my bases, blow the excess off. Don't worry about sealing it too much. It's absolutely fine if it's just brushed into the detail on the base there, and it just adds more variance, makes your bases look a little bit more military modelling-esque. A little bit of mud effect here, a different kind of mud effect rather than a basing material, little splots here and there, and you can even bring some of that mud up onto the miniature as well, especially if it's someone that's in the trenches or someone that's fighting in a wet, muddy area. They're going to get muddy, the uniform's going to get muddy, and if maybe they've been dead for a while and they've been lying on the ground, there might be some of that mud mixed in with the blood and ichor on their clothing as well. So don't be frightened to add a little bit there onto their clothing, because I think it just really adds to the overall effect, makes your miniature look a lot cooler than it would be without it. And then maybe I'm just obsessed with the blood effects, but any excuse to use them, it's always good. I'm obviously a child at heart. There's wounds on the feet and things, so I thought maybe we can have a little bit spilling out onto the base as well. Again, a little bit less is more there. And then for me, it's always a black rim to my bases, and this zombie is done. And it genuinely took me, if we take out the drying times, 10 minutes to do this. It was super quick paint job, and that's what you want when you've got lots of these things to paint. In most game systems that have zombies, they're incredibly cheap points wise, and you have massive hordes of them. Do you want them to be easy? And I'm not proud of this as a paint job as such. There's no real skill gone into this. It's all a technique with effects, paints and things, but it just shows that you can have something a little really cool on the tabletop and it take you no time whatsoever. So yeah, make sure you let me know what you think in the comments, and are you playing Konflikt 47, and what do you think of the pages I showed in that book? I think they look pretty cool. As always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much, Warlord Games, for sending those bits over, and hopefully I showed you how easy it is to paint zombies of any game system, really. And also hope you don't mind me painting it that quickly and doing it in such a basic way. But I just really wanted to try something a little bit quick and a little bit different. But if you have enjoyed the video, please drop a comment below, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, all of that usual stuff. If you want to support me and the channel even more, please do check out my Patreon. There's a link to that in the video description. And thank you as always to all my existing patrons. I couldn't do what I do without your support. Also check out the channel sponsor, Counterattack Bases. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.